Yes, well, thank you again for having me. It's always really nice to come and visit Aspendale. I wish it was under slightly better circumstances, but Brett, I'm very thankful with you that the surgery has gone well, and we'll continue to pray for Alison. We're looking at Isaiah today, and we're sort of looking at the passages around chapter 9 there, where it talks about the Prince of Peace, and the question that we have before us today is, who is this Prince of Peace? And I, of course, know that you know the answer. The Prince of Peace is Jesus. You all know that, right? It's Jesus. I know that you know the answer, but the question is more, who is this Prince of Peace in that, in the sense of, what's this Prince of Peace like? What does the Bible promise about this Prince of Peace? How does the Prince of Peace in the context of Isaiah 1 to 12 anticipate Jesus and explain who Jesus is to us? So that's the question, who is this Prince of Peace? And like I said, it's a part of a section of Isaiah chapters 1 to 12 that sets up the whole book. And there are a cluster of titles or people in these first 12 chapters that later on, when Jesus comes, are applied to him. So we'll be looking at those titles here in Isaiah 1 to 12. Who is this Prince of Peace? And the first thing I want to say is that he is Emmanuel. Emmanuel. Who is the Prince of Peace? He is Emmanuel, the first individual that we're introduced to in Isaiah 1 to 12. And that title, Emmanuel, means God with us. And it's a massive reassurance for God to promise us a person who signifies and guarantees that he is with us. And in the original context, this hope of Emmanuel, it's actually a sign. This sign of Emmanuel is a hope amidst the rubble. That's what it is to God's people at that time. And it's very comforting, very reassuring. One of the new 7 wonders of the world is the statue, Christ the Redeemer, that towers over Rio de Janeiro. And I think it's a marvellous, amazing statue. It's 38 metres high, including its base, and 28 metres span. His hands are held out like that. It's an Art Deco sculpture made of concrete and stone. And I think it's breathtaking in one of the most beautiful cities in the world too, right? It's an amazing context. But Christ the Redeemer statue hovers over the favelas, the slums of Rio de Janeiro. And the crime rate is horrific. It's been a while since I've looked up the stats, but last time it was something like, 1 homicide a week in the favelas. It's an incredibly violent place full of gangs and drugs, and they've got a specially created police force just to try and look after the favelas and keep the peace. And they can't manage it, it's out of control, but they look like soldiers. They're just, kitted up with machine guns and all this incredible protective gear. And I've seen a photo, actually, of the special police force they've created to try and keep control of the favelas, standing underneath at the foot of Christ the Redeemer statue. And it's just such a jarring picture. Here's this Jesus figure who stands so beautifully but serenely above the chaos below. And you think, what do people think about that statue or the reality of Jesus? If you're a child being raised in the favela, where is Jesus? Is he anything more than a beautiful statue with stone eyes who appears extremely passive as he is beautiful? And that's a sentiment, I think, that the people of God at the opening of the book of Isaiah could really relate to. Um, uh, this is at a point in their history, a long time after King David came along and after King Solomon, his son, and after the kingdom had divided, and now there's a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom, and they're constantly being invaded, and they're kind of a small tin pot nation among much more powerful nations around them. They're kind of on their knees in terms of their prosperity and their power and their influence. And it describes God's people, and Isaiah is particularly speaking to the southern kingdom, to the city of Jerusalem in Judah. It describes Judah in these terms, and I think it's a kind of a funny description. In Isaiah 1, it says, "Your country is desolate. Your cities burned with fire. Your fields are being stripped by foreigners right before you, laid waste as when overthrown by strangers. Daughter Zion is left like a shelter in a vineyard." And here's the one I like. Listen to this. "Daughter Zion is left like a hut in a cucumber field." Get that. How bad is that? You've been left like a hut in a cucumber field. Does that make you really feel how desolate Jerusalem and Judah is? I've got no idea what a hut in a cucumber field being abandoned is like. I just think it's a funny description. But that's apparently what they're like. They're kind of without hope. And the sign of Emmanuel comes in the context, and it's a bit of a complicated story, so I'm just going to cut a long story short. Comes in a situation where the king at the time of Jerusalem is being threatened with invasion from the northern kingdom, Israel, and another Gentile country. And Isaiah speaks to Ahaz, the king at the time, and says, don't make a deal with him, trust God. He will look after you. And Isaiah says to Ahaz, ask for a sign that God is going to be with you. And Ahaz wavers and he falters and he doesn't know what to do. He's just full of indecision and doubt. And God says, I'm going to give you a sign anyway, even though you're not really asking for a sign because you don't want to trust me. I'm going to give you a sign anyway. And the sign is going to be a child that's going to be born right now here in your city. His name will be Emmanuel, God with us. And the reason why this young child is a sign is because by the time this child is old enough to make his own decisions, to know right from wrong, 12, 13, 14, something like that? In just 12, 13, 14 years, Ahaz, God is going to completely wipe out the two nations that you're currently afraid of, that you want to make a deal with. God is going to wipe them out using Assyria, and Assyria is going to come in even and invade you and reduce you to utter rubble, but you will not be wiped out. Assyria is going to be like a floodwater coming in, and it's going to come up to your neck. It's going to threaten to wipe you out, but it won't. And I'm telling you this is going to happen. And when you run into this kid in about 12, 13, 14 years, called Emmanuel in the street somewhere, you will remember what I've said to you. And you'll look around and you'll see that everything I've said has come true, and you will know that even though I'm partly judging you, I am with you. And you should never have doubted the sign of Emmanuel, God is with us. So listen to what it says in Isaiah chapter 8, verses 6 to 8. Because this people has rejected the gently flowing waters of Shiloh and rejoices over Rezin and the son of Remaliah, therefore the Lord is about to bring against them the mighty floodwaters of the Euphrates. The king of Assyria with all his pomp, it will overflow all its channels, run over all its banks, and sweep on into Judah and Jerusalem, swirling over it, passing through it, and reaching up to the neck. Its outspread wings will cover the breadth of your land, Emmanuel. The sign of Emmanuel is that there is hope amid the rubble. God is not just a statue, beautifully but passively floating over the favelas. God does allow evil to happen. God even allows evil to happen to his people. But God is with us. He gets it. He sees and he cares. And he promises here in the first 12 chapters of Isaiah that one day in the future, when the time is right, when the time is come, I will set everything right. That's why a few chapters later, he also promises the Prince of Peace, which is particularly what we're looking at today. I've given you the sign of Emmanuel, I'm with you, and I am going to send the Prince of Peace, he says over the page in chapter 9. Listen to what it says there. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. There is coming a figure, an individual, who will make sure that peace happens. A wonderful counselor, mighty God. I remember when Barack Obama was president of the United States, that I think in his first year or two, I'm not quite sure if that's the case, but I think it was in the first couple of years though, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, Barack Obama. And I remember the consternation that he received the Nobel Peace Prize. He presided over the largest military the world has ever known. Massive. Billions and billions, I can't remember, like hundreds of billions of dollars each year budgeted to just pour into defence. It was 5 or 6 times larger than China's, the second largest military operation in the world. 5 or 6 times larger at the time. And at the time, they were involved in 3 wars. And people are saying, Nobel Peace Prize? But here you'll notice that it's saying that this wonderful counselor, this Prince of Peace, will establish peace in the same way, with the might of his rule. That's why it says there, of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. Here what it is foreshadowing, what it's predicting, is great King David's greatest son. In Isaiah chapter 1 to 12, there is this picture, this image given, this hope of Zion, which is a future idealized picture of when King David used to reign. So 500, 600 years before this prophecy was given, King David, their greatest ever king, the king they all looked up to and looked back to and admired, he ruled in Jerusalem. And he was a great ruler, and he was militarily mighty. And at the time, the Jerusalem, the city from which he ruled, had a certain sort of boundary and walls, and over time it grew and expanded, and people would look back on the city at the time of David, built on this hill called Zion, And they would call it, their future hope would be Mount Zion, like looking back to Jerusalem and projecting it forward and going, one day there will be great King David's greatest son. It says here that he will rule forever, right? There will be a king who rules forever on David's throne, be just like David, but better, and he will make sure by the might of his rule that there is peace. It's like in Psalm 2, you've got this Son of God, which is a title for the king, installed by God, and it says that, why do the nations plot in vain? Why do the rulers conspire against God and his anointed one? And it says at the end of that psalm, kiss the Son, lest he be angry with you. So it's giving you two options there. Either come and find refuge in the Son or be judged by him. That's the kind of peace that will be established here. This coming wonderful counselor, Prince of Peace, his law will go out over the whole world. That's the vision given in chapters 1 to 12. He will root out evil and make sure justice reigns. And the reason why that's good, the reason why people won't be shaking their head in consternation when this king receives the Nobel Peace Prize is because he doesn't rule like Barack Obama. He doesn't judge. That's the point into the stick here, right? He doesn't judge like Barack Obama. And that's because, and this is the third title, the third person we're looking at here in Isaiah. In chapter 11, it says that this king will not judge by what he sees or what he hears. Listen to what it says in Isaiah chapter 11, verses 1 to 3. Actually, a few more, verses 2. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of the knowledge and fear of the Lord, and he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes or decide by what he hears with his ears, but with righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, with the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist. What a funny thing to say, right? That he will not judge by what he sees with his eyes or decide by what he hears with his ears. But isn't that exactly what is required if this king is going to reign over everyone and everything and judge the wicked and make sure that righteousness is done? Shouldn't he be particularly attentive to what he sees and be very careful to listen? But the point it's making here is that this king is not human. He's filled with the Spirit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. The Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of the knowledge and fear of the Lord, and he will delight in the fear of the Lord. Here is a king who is in a position. Barack Obama, I'm very thankful actually for the Pax Americana. I'm very thankful for the rule of America and for Obama and all the presidents. Actually, I think America by and large seems to me to be a positive force in the world, and I'm very thankful that they exist. I think they more or less keep things in check, not perfectly by any means, but somewhat, yes they do. But as powerful as America is, I would never want the president of the US to have absolute power. That would be terrifying. I would never want a president in the US to be installed forever. That would be terrifying. Because you know the saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. We know that to be the case. Even with all the checks and balances now, there's a good deal of corruption, isn't there? We know this in the way that America operates in the world. But here God is promising someone who we can trust, who it will be a delight to sit under their rule, who can get the job done, who we can rely on, who will actually fix things up. Not just somewhat, not just half, completely. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry with you. We can go to him and find refuge and forgiveness and peace, or we will be judged. Nothing will escape his attention. So this is the promise given to God's people in Isaiah 1 to 12, when they're like a hut deserted in a cucumber field, when they're not doing well, when they're on their knees, when they've got this threat of invasion, when God promises in the next 10 years you will be invaded, even by Assyria, up to your neck. Things are not looking good for them. What does God promise? Emmanuel, I am with you. Even as I bring my judgment, you'll see this child, you'll remember everything I've said, you will know that I see, that I hear, that I'm with you side by side. And I will, in the future, rescue you. As sure as I've predicted this judgment of Assyria, will come the decisive victory at the end. And of course, that's why it's so wonderful when Jesus comes onto the scene and the gospel says, He is Emmanuel. He's our ultimate sign that God is with us. And in the first century, the Jewish nation under Roman occupation needed to hear that. That promise of Isaiah still stands. And when he lived the life he lived, he worked out what it meant for it to be recorded in the gospel that the Spirit descended on him like a dove. He interacted with people in his earthly ministry with such wisdom. Wonderful Counselor, Prince of Peace. It was evident for everyone to see. He wasn't guided by what he saw or what he heard, by human intuition. He was guided by the righteousness and wisdom of God himself. Even to this day, that's why everyone seems to love Jesus. Even people who aren't Christians love Jesus, right? Everyone says this, he's one of the most amazing, if not the most amazing man to ever live. Why does everyone recognize this? Because he is actually good. He is profoundly wise. Isaiah's coming true. We've seen it come true in Jesus. And then he died on the cross. And then he rose again. And now it says God's appointed him as judge. We can derive such confidence and joy from this. I'll end with this. Mark Twain said in apparently the 19th century, he said, Christianity will be here. Christianity will be here in 10 centuries from now. It'll be here. It'll be with us. It'll be stuffed and in a museum. That's what he said. And it can feel like that, can't it? It can really feel like sometimes, wow, it's really waning. But century after century, and it's been quite a while since Mark Twain said those words, century after century, it just keeps marching on. We've got Isaiah, we've got Jesus, and we've got confidence. And Christianity is flourishing in all sorts of pockets in the world. Obviously, China, South America, in parts of Africa, it's going gangbusters. And it will keep doing the same because we have met the Prince of Peace, Emmanuel, Spirit-filled King. Let me pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word, and we thank you for the wonderful reassurance of Isaiah 1 to 12, and that centuries upon centuries ago, you promised who we have now seen in Jesus. Thank you for the clarity. Thank you for the assurance. Please, God, help us to trust deeply in Jesus, our King, our Prince of Peace, and help us to live lives which show that we have confidence in him. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.